of the directions, just to kind of invite some more positive energies in before I talk about these types of topics. In part to avoid any drama later on, because last year I had some pretty nasty psychic attacks from the lecture that I gave on this topic, and it took me like a day and a half to clear it out. So I definitely want to avoid any extra drama, although we've closed a lot of back doors since that point. And just before I do that, I'm just curious about the description that I wrote of today's content, if there were certain things about it that stood out to you in the audience that you wanted me to maybe elaborate more on, certain aspects of it, or if there were, like what drew you, if there was a particular concept that maybe that you want me to explore a little more in depth, because, you know, after all, I'm doing it for you guys here, so like, I always like to get some feedback on that before I start, you know. Anybody, or you can be shy and just let me talk. But feel free, even throughout it as I go into stuff, if a question comes up later on, I'll ask you guys, you know, if you have any questions about some of the material. So I'm just going to play a little bit of music in the background while I call on the archangels, give us some psychic cover. Now, some of these shows are crazy. I don't know, you walk around the expo sometimes, there's a lot of energetic free radicals flying around that you have to defend yourself from. It's a little bit like Harry Potter meets Doctor Strange at times. Yeah, the energy vampires too, yeah, they usually come around. Gotta walk with the garlic, you know? Yeah, exactly. All right, so it's actually everybody just to like breathe in, and you can close your eyes and kind of invite some of these energies in as I call them. It'll be quick. I'm just doing the 6 directions. I'm not doing my normal meditations. Call upon our higher selves to be with us. Mother, Father, God, one infinite creator. Welcome our spirit guides and guardian angels. Welcome our power animals. And enlightened, loving ancestor relations to bless this space and bless each of us here in this room. Also invite beloved Archangel Raphael to be with us in the east. Melech Raphael, to bless our mental bodies, air element, to help us clean out any energetic debris or junk within our mental orbits that are for highest good release throughout this discussion. We ask for the angels to assist us in widening the partition of our self-discovery and peering through the nature of these topics today with more grace and protection, love and wisdom. Welcome Archangel Michael to be with us in the south. Melech Michael, beloved Archangel Michael, to bless our fire element. Shemesh Michael, Malachim Michael, angels of the sun. Give us these beautiful purifying solar filters, a waterfall of solar chi energy. It's coming in like through like these sheets, vertical sheets, solar purifying energy coming in the room. The crown of Archangel Michael to bless us. Gateways of purity, love, and wisdom. Like Archangel Gabriel to be with us in the west. Beloved Melech Gabriel to bless our water element. Shaddai Chai Gabriel. Help us transmute and heal our emotional bodies. Help us open our inner drainage system. Help us release any built up toxicities or shadow sticky thought forms that need some washing out. Melech Gabriel. Help us continue to bless us with this post-full moon energies in Taurus. Help us stabilize more love in the form to assist us to transform. gonna seal in the lunar back doors. Now like Uriel in the north to be with us. Beloved Archangel Uriel. Bless our earth element. Beloved Uriel. Strengthen the healing and harmony and love flow in our physical bodies. They might ground more of these higher keys of wisdom throughout this gathering. And protect our earth element from any uninvited guests. Melech Metatron above us, Lord Archangel Metatron, bless our crown chakra. The mighty I Am Elohim presences to strengthen each of your personal gateway connections to your higher self, galactic self. You might invite more of your galactic selves to come through you throughout this gathering. From only positive starry lineages. Metatron's light to continue to rainbow waterfall throughout this whole room. A beautiful sovereign light bubble. Melech Sindalphin beneath us, Archangel Sindalphin. Bless our space from below. More Mother Earth's light to flow up into our space. And the energy of the higher light city of New York will also be blessing us throughout this gathering. Melech Sindalphin, help us clean our root chakra and our roots of our tree of life to be free of strife. So only the highest love and light be allowed to enter from below. Thanks to our Starheart Nation Medicine Craft to also be with us. And bless us from our Arcturian Stargate realms, Pleiadian realms. Help overlay their beautiful energy of a higher light temple within this room. We might feel more of our own higher wisdom, more clearly discernible to us. I ask these angels to continue to spiral this light around us as we shift phase. Give thanks to these beings. Somebody be Matakriasan. Much better, right? Feel a lot clearer in here now. It's okay, like some angelic window washing. So as part of the cosmic shamanism work, I mean, usually what I just did right now is kind of like an initial kind of opening where I invite the archangels in and different spirit guides from each of the directions. Part of the work is starting at the basic shamanic level is about honoring your own 4 directions and above and below to make 6. It's like redefining our own ability to more clearly calibrate to higher realms by first being in a grounded position and honoring the basic components. Like think of like Feng Shui, of honoring your own 8 directions of your Bagua wheel. In a similar manner, it's honoring the different elemental makeups that form a composite, right, for our emotional body, mental body, physical, spiritual, so that they come more into alignment with each other. And from more of that stable positioning, you can create more of a foundational space to have like a cornerstone in which you can build your pyramid of connection between the lower realms and the higher realms. So it's creating a more stable grounding area for that lightning bolt, as in the Kabbalistic tree of life, to be able to ground from the higher realms into Malkuth, into the kingdom that we are all dwelling in. So we have more availability and more access to a greater repertoire of your own natural skill sets that maybe you forgot a little bit about that can be more easily called in once you kind of clean and calibrate your space. Part of that energy also is about creating more of a synthesis between the basic 3 worlds, so that more gradations of love energy that are being sent to the earth from our higher cosmic positive kin can have a place to be grounded, to be more present, to be more anchored and felt in each of your lives. So each of us are an extension of this galactic, universal love tree of life. And the more we're able to sprout and connect that energy, bringing in that tree of life down through all the different worlds that we are part of, then we're building literally a light bridge between not only ourselves and our higher self, but between higher positive collective consciousnesses that want to help the earth evolve and transit out of this age of the shadow matrix structures, which obviously we're pretty much in the thick of it right now. So many dramas going on right now, and it's really it's also pushing up a lot of the trigger points for our collective sense of identity. And it's important that we do come to a position where to unify, to be able to call out injustices, but also find a place where you have to understand that some of these negative forces that want to keep the matrix in play are really trying to have us bicker amongst each other and almost like over-identify with the sense of entitlement and individual labels that really we can transcend when we understand that we're all humans, but also we're galactic cosmic beings that transcend our race, we transcend our gender. We've been all different genders and races throughout so many lifetimes. So to be overly attached to some of these ideas right now and have it be used against us is kind of really childish in my opinion, and we need to really kind of step up to our accountability and not let any of our personal wounds create that kind of triggered act reaction without at least using wisdom and a heart-centered discourse to be able to analyze what is happening, because there's also a lot of disinformation, a lot of media distortion, a lot of things happening, that are really trying to vie for our attention to try to create chaos in the four directions so that our emotions, our minds, our survival, the different areas are being tested and threatened, especially for certain groups of people more so than others. So it's even more important that we kind of create that commonality of this spiral of unity consciousness and understand that there's a larger kind of pyramid of control that has been hovering above all of us, and has many tentacles that go out into all different sectors of society. And those tentacles are being cut in some areas, and so they're getting a little more, it's like the Hydra beast, it's getting more agitated, and it wants to kind of surface more and find more ripe areas in which it can regenerate more of the chaos energy, because more love and more light is coming in from the higher realms and from Gaia's central core, and her new axis of alignment is getting really powerful with her shift in the rising Kundalini tide. So the shadow forces need to, create more creative, or more just, not even creative, sometimes it's really stupid, that's just very base level kind of drama events in order to, create more of a fear porn, attachment or shock and awe, in order to draw us out of our center and feed their little dark timeline that they're desperate to regurgitate, back on our canvas of reality, which we don't need to keep perpetuating that. So that's an important background when doing the higher work, because there's grounded implications of us being harbingers of change, right? Whatever area of society you're in, whatever area of work you're in, to be able to transcend the binary of the left and right that we're being kind of torn in our country here. It's part of the Hegelian dialectic that the Illuminati uses, try to polarize the population, corral them into a sense of, false political identification, and things around it, and then we're easily fighting against each other, and it's meanwhile, there's a third player that's the puppeteer screwing both sides. So it's important that we call out the shots, but also transcend that binary and achieve a deeper level of unity within ourselves, because otherwise we just reinforce the old rhetoric of the matrix control system, and we're really here to kind of blast it out and not just keep rewriting that dark graffiti. So part of building this bridge is important, because the center of the four directions here, the work we do, whether it's a cube or an octahedron, that's the basic idea of the six directions, is really the heart chakra, right? So the love energy needs to be the center, like the cross of Christ consciousness. It needs to be able to infuse each element, because when each element is out of alignment with the heart chakra or love energy, then we have entropy. We have more of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, in our field, in our life, and we start to attract situations that mirror that imbalance within ourselves, and it certainly creates recycling negative loops if we keep reinforcing it, and then we get caught in this little like lower fractal iteration, right, of a circle instead of being in a spiral, and then we wonder why we keep manifesting the same thing as a self-fulfilling prophecy instead of actually realizing we have a co-creative power to transcend that little template that we've been kind of maybe a little bit coerced into navigating or feeding, So it's taking back your own, we're making like a collective love mural, with all of our creative energies. So we need to take back that paint so it's not being wasted on these dark visions, on this negative canvas board that the elite want us to, keep creating for them, because they're losing more power to control us, so they want us to control each other in that sense, and use our own free will against us. So it's very important that you understand the power of your free will is really paramount at this time to really envision a new timeline, a new reality, a new clear route in which we are all in the real age of Aquarius and not getting smacked back with the dark wake of the age of Pisces, which is trying to throw us back into this martyrdom and victimization role, instead of a collective unity identity. And that because also as the new galactic energies are coming in, so they have to try to hit at the lower chakras in order to have us dissociate with the higher realms, which are trying to beam their light in through the clouds of deception that are kind of floating around us. So part of the spiritual work is really being like the sun, activating the inner sun in your heart, so you're able to pierce through those clouds of illusion and deception, and be a beacon, because realizing that each of you are part of the ground teams, of a cosmic light crew, that chose to come here, especially during this intense time, to be able to really be the gatekeepers to open that age of Aquarius and really be able to plant those seed crystals of love in this timeline, because it's very critical that we build up enough resonance of the love energy to be able to act as like a Brita filter, in order to be able to purify the negative dissonance and the discord that has come around us, a lot. So part of that energy is being aware also of some of our galactic family members that we can also invoke and work with, because it's helpful. It's like just like knowing who the angels are, the directions, as a basic idea of correspondence of as above, so below. A lot of the higher galactic beings, will have certain qualities to them that can be grounded through different angelic rays. What is this mic a little? Am I too close to it? Let's see. Do I sound okay in the back? Okay, thank you, John. One of the groups I'll always talk about, I haven't talked about in a while, is some of the positive Nordic extraterrestrials that are multidimensional, that are really the inspirers of, they're the real Thor and Odin group, basically. Thor, Odin, Freya. I'm sure some of you have seen like the Marvel movies of Thor, but it's also quite impressive because like Marvel actually, there's so many points of disclosure that Marvel has in these movies. It just amazes me. There'll be themes when they're talking about in the movies, and we'll have spiritual battles before the movie comes out, dealing with some of these characters, in a higher dimensional way, and then they're portraying it in either Marvel cartoon or in the movie. And I'm like, wow, there's somebody feeding Marvel information here about some of the bigger themes. Because even some of the characters are talking about, have you seen like the Thor movie, their depiction of Asgard is very, very close to how some of the geometries and structures of one of the cities of the actual planet where the real Asgard is at, which is basically in the constellation of Boötes, where Arcturus is at. So there are basically two planets that are around that system, and Arcturus that I do a lot of channeling work with, and I've had a lot of friends and clients that are star seeds that have incarnations from those realms. And the idea is also that, as a star seed or a star person, wanderer, whatever you want to call it, we are not native to this planet on a soul level. And realizing that part of our collective mission, as star people, is to be able to, create that clear, illuminating path so that you can have re-access to your native collective realms, to higher galactic consciousness fields that your soul comes from, or has at least had affiliation with. To be able to retrace that, kind of grid of connections, like Ariadne's thread, through your labyrinth of lives, so you can be able to bring it down here and help us defeat the Minotaur, in that sense, with more of you intact. So there's been a lot of distortion systems being put in play to try to block star seeds from adequately acclimatizing and calibrating with the frequencies that are being sent from some of the higher starry temples, some of the galactic temples, some of the higher spaceships that are multidimensional, some of the fleets that are connected to our starry lineages, want to broadcast more energy into the earth, and especially through star people that are part of their lineage, because we're the ground crew. So once you kind of get out of that frame of reference of just thinking you're a human here, and knowing that you are a galactic ground crew representative, an emissary of a higher consciousness field that is here to help the earth, right? It can help you kind of get over some of your basic shit. In that sense, kind of step out of your own way of your own little manure pit there, and oh my God, poor me, or it's really important to transcend some of the drama that we're addicted to sometimes in our own little operatic lives, and be able to say, wait a minute, why are we still empowering so many of these levels? And it's understandable if you're doing frontier work and you're trying to change situations. Yeah, you're going to run against some of the inertia of the negative groups that maybe don't want change. So the idea there is that it's a test for you to anchor even more unity, to be able to transmute that separation that those negative forces are trying to reinstate amongst us. So, and this is one of the particular Arcturian groups. One of the planets is called Valthusia. This is basically Valthusia, and the other one is Valdor or Valdoria. So it goes by a masculine and feminine name. And the thing about Valthusia and Arcturus, this is like the real Asgard. So just in terms of knowing its names, because these names haven't been really talked about. Like I've been channeling them for a number of years, but I'm slowly getting this out eventually in the Cosmic Shamanism book, once I finish the Kabbalah book, which will definitely be done this coming year. But it's important that, there are certain terms that they'll give us as part of the Cosmic Shamanism, like lingo or jargon, that kind of help us to transcend the limitations of connotations that might be limited from other words that we use. For example, how there were so many connotations of the word God, how this has been polluted or diluted, right? Especially different religious figures or terminologies. So part of this process is also kind of upgrading our idea of our spiritual language, of our magical language. That is very unifying. It's trans-religious, because it's more like an omni-spiritual idea that you can kind of find seeds of it in different traditions. And at the same time, it's kind of like a way to calibrate us to a level of of an arc of light that is not able to be, that hasn't been influenced yet by the lower discord, attachments or projections that people have on those terms. So knowing some of the names are helpful just to kind of call in that energy during our meditation processes, because it all requires free will, to be able to invoke these allies. It's helpful to know some of their names. Start basic stuff here. So some of the Valthusians, the real Asgardians, Thor and Oda group, it's interesting because Thor, he is a higher dimensional being. It's not just like, wielding a nice little hammer like in the movie, although these hammers do come into play. I mean, there are higher dimensional, magical, and physical, technological items that these higher architects of these higher civilizations do wield. Because the same way that magicians or shamans or priestesses or witches on our realm can work with different elements, to work with the laws of creation, the realm of magic and how energy flows and is able to condense it through our intention. The same thing occurs in higher dimensions with our galactic brothers and sisters. They're not just up there flying around their spaceships, It's all not just that. It's their metaphysical, spiritual, psychic quotient is equally as high. So when they want to transmit a telepathic message to us, it doesn't matter if they're in Arcturus or the Pleiades, and it's just a matter of you calibrating your own receptor, kind of a kit here in your brain, your neural networks, creating certain geometries around you. So like aiming a satellite dish towards a satellite, you can receive that signal, And so part of it's about asking that your angels and guides create more of a clear space for that receptivity, so that that signal is not diluted, polluted, diminished, or mimicked. Because oftentimes you'll have negative things up there, negativity groups and shadow government, Illuminati groups, deep space program groups that have gone crazy out of their way to try to manipulate some of these spaces in which the energies are coming in to try to throw off star people from properly grounding, their mission completion or the next phase of our mission. And it's also tied to some of the darker projects that these groups have done in terms of military abductions and targeting a lot of star kids when they were younger with exploiting them, kidnapping them, implanting them, all sorts of programming methodologies. I mean, I go more into that in some videos on YouTube. I mean, I went through a military abduction back in the late 90s, upstate New York, and James Rink had done an interview with me back in 2014 where I go more into that story. But I still work with different people, like I have like a niche of clients that have also had military abductions or had seen some really horrible stuff from like satanic ritual abuse groups or had connections to the military or the bloodlines. So there's a lot of interesting stuff out there that's going on. And for me, there's a lot of disinformation, but so I always try to filter for me what's my own truth, what's my access of what I can feel. And from working many, over 20 years with people individually, and helping them guide them to different shamanic journeys, into past lives, and into higher realms, into different lineages. I kind of learned a lot of stuff just from also working with people and learning from them. My clients teach me as much as I teach them, just from working with them and understanding that we each are like pixels of this new reality stage. We have very precious cargo that we've carried with us, different soul pieces, soul gifts, in information fields that have actual real pieces of history that are still encoded in it. Because we have so much disinformation and revisionist history, and of the conquerors always changing our history, that, part of their methodology is to try to not only divide us, now, but also try to cut us off from our sense of knowingness of our true lineage, not just extraterrestrially, but as humans, trying to cut us off from the history of Atlantis, trying to cut us off from the history of Lemuria. I mean, these are very powerful civilizations that they've gone a long way out of to try to help us disassociate from and create sideband disinformation campaigns, especially around Sumeria and Anunnaki and having humans think that they're made from being slaves when it's not at all what the case was. There are experiments being done to manipulate it, but their whole agenda is trying to insert false theorems and false historical narratives so that we have a twisted past and therefore we are more able to be manipulated in the future. So we have to really try to claim our lineage and understand what is your true soul tracks that you have incarnated through. We've all had incarnations in these ancient cultures, and I had worked on somebody just recently, just a few days ago, that showed me a whole different level of a whole different area of like Lemuria that I never saw before from my own meditations. And these things can sometimes trigger us to help us access almost like our root chakra of history. So when we do that, some of those earlier lifetimes we've had on Earth, especially if you're a starseed, sometimes you need to tap into a past life that represents your first time coming into the Earth from the higher realms. And you can kind of use that as a bounce off point, like light reflecting off a mirror in your timeline, and be able to more properly triangulate now with your starry point of origin, or at least some of your explorations up there. Because our galactic families have done many intercessions in Earth's history. So some of them are very poignant and very beautiful. And when you have that as a resource and your background running like a program, it can help reinforce your momentum to kind of shift out of a negative spin that you might be in now and be able to say, okay, I can transcend this and recalibrate to something that's really more permanent, a more eternal part of my identity, as opposed to this transient nonsense that's tying me up in this loop. In this piece of like Lemurian history, there was a central river that they were showing me that was kind of like the Nile River for Egypt, but it was running through the center of Lemuria, like from like north and south. And it ran along, it was like kind of like a snake pathway of the river, and it was running through a lot of these tall mountains and some pyramid complexes. And they would have the initiates go through like a 2 to 4 year like initiatory training period to go through these different temples and meet with the different tribes that were present, that lived on those different areas of that Lemurian kind of pilgrimage of initiation. And it was very powerful, very beautiful. And there was also a connection with Aldebaran that was coming in for this person, that just like all ancient cultures, different cultures had anchored, and aligned different temples to connect to different constellations so that they could honor their starry ancestors, or the star nations would have a more direct place to interface, in the local dialogue, right, of the tribe, of the community, through ritual, through celebration, through, storylines, through mythology, through actual, technologies. So once we kind of tap into some of those, points of reference, it creates like these benchmarks in our timeline and in our collective timeline, so that when we draw it back to ourselves and let it come through our bodies, we help shake the collective consensus reality a little more out of this miasm and of illusion, to be able to break through some of the density of the negative clouds, right, that have been trying to keep us in a lower kind of spin, out of alignment with love. So the more we kind of can wake up to the power of our true and positive memories and use it like an arrow of intention, we can really shoot it through some of these dark systems. And be able to be like the sunlight piercing a cloud with a ray of hope and truth that overcomes all the illusion of deception and despair, because there's a lot of despair energy they're also trying to project out lately, depression, despair, like hopelessness energy, and we really have to really stay centered not to buy into that, because it's like background malware noise that's basically being projected subliminally, electromagnetically, psychotronically, different technologies. So, but that's even more important, especially living in New York where there's so much background chatter, just from all the technology shit we have and all the people's stuff flying around, that we need to really maintain our own etheric spiritual hygiene, right, on a daily basis, so that our antenna systems aren't polluted by all that dross of like maybe negative empathy or absorption that your fields might accrue over time, just because of you're being busy and not realizing it. So it's having that attention to clear your intention each day, so that you have like taking a shower, brushing your teeth, it's basic hygiene, but applied on an emotional, mental, spiritual level, and really assess how are you feeling, why are you feeling this way, what are you thinking, is it your thoughts, is it your emotions? Try to track it back and like be more conscientious of paying subtle attention to your subtle shifts in your field or your dialogue that's going on, and don't just think, oh, it's just something else happening, blah blah, I'm not going to pay attention to it. No, because it could be messages there, or it could be things trying to infiltrate or like plot, or like plant things in you to try to amplify their false signal. Because just like somebody can be a carrier of a virus and not have it, some of these negative groups try to use people in their back doors as like carriers of like negative etheric parasites or negative etheric intention, and have it just broadcast around, like a little negative web of matrix energy. So it's not just about yourself, it's being of service, realizing that you don't want to be co-opted, you also don't want to be a vessel for something that's not nice. The same way that you complain about people on the subway and not wanting their shit on your field, maybe on a subtle level you might be doing the same thing and don't realize it. So it's important that you really take responsibility for your own center, and your own purity of your psychic environment, so that you become a walking acupuncture needle, right, of new light, of new weaving a positive grid, that creates a larger like mandala that the higher realms can then bring more energy in to our collective, field of energy that we're creating together, but it's uniting together in alignment that makes it easier for that coherent signal to come in without it being dissipated or dispersed. Back to like something about Malthusian. So there's like kind of like a mystery school planet there in Malthusia, where the Arcturians in that general, the ones related to like the Nordic group, they're a very strong like galactic defender race. So they're involved a lot in protecting other planets. Think of like Knights of the Round Table mixed with like Archangel Michael energy and like Thor and Odin. So it's a really powerful vibration there. So they can really kick some ass when need be, in terms of like the negative ETs and negative agendas. I mean, they're involved in a lot of things that we're not really understanding fully down here. There's a much bigger battle that's been going on for quite some time, where also a lot of Andromedans. There's a huge influx of fleets coming in from Andromeda into the Milky Way from many, many different civilizations in Andromeda. Andromeda is going to play a much bigger role in our future, like longer-term future than we realize. And I mean, I've tapped into them a bunch of times with several people in different groups, and every time it's happened, just to feel that energy and like, I mean, it's like, so I can't even describe how many beings that are coming in there. It's a huge contingency that's going to be involved in our long-term restructuring of our whole solar system and helping our planet in the future. But they're involved in a bigger kind of war against the alien artificial intelligence groups that originate from outside of our galaxy. So they're coming in to kind of hold the front line to help transmute some of the negative AI groups that are going on, and some of the positive Arcturian groups working with the Thor and Odin group. They're working with the Andromedans as well to kind of help heal some of the breaches of that AI energy. And we can see that AI kind of crap trying to float around in our transhumanism, you know, rhetoric in our society, and some of the warnings about the dangers of AI, and groups that are funding all this research, and every government's funding billions of dollars of research to advance AI. You know, at the same time, the higher elite understands some of the dangers of that, you know, of course. But it's us being more conscious to not to give our power away to technology and its desire to usurp our spirit and our identity of being more than just matter and more than just something that we can transfer into a damn computer system. You know, it's very important that we don't get caught by the allure of that, you know, technocratic kind of desire, their wet dream to like hold us all in this other reality. You know, because it is part of that energy and part of that transfer of that wave of control. You know, and it's interesting because part of the Thor Odin group, like they work a lot, as well as higher 4D groups. There's a whole different relationship they have to electromagnetic energy, right? So part of the symbolism, like Thor's hammer, literally is like, think of like the power of the lightning bolt, or like the Thunderbird energy, the lightning bolts of the Tree of Life, to be able to create and break through negative structures. But there's also a softer aspect where I had a dream about it one time where I was seeing some of the Asgardians coming to me in a dream, and we all had our own version of Thor's hammer that was flying over our heads, pointing down. They said you can invoke your own higher Arcturian Thor hammer to also help you heal. So it becomes more like a softer discharge of like a warmer, positive electromagnetic energy that helps restructure and rewire your body. And so as opposed to just using it to fight against, say, like the negative groups, or, you know, in that sense. So, you know, so part of the idea is that these symbols, like hammer, for example, or sword, you know, these are potent archetypes that our consciousness uses, especially the right brain, to help us organize our intention, to be able to create healthy boundaries, to help us be cut free from certain things we want to be free from. So it's not just like, oh, airy-fairy stuff, you know, it's like a magical, like, light video game in a sense, you know? Where we really are, that part of us works with the language of symbolism just as much, more so than we do with our linear language that I'm talking about right now. That's why it's used so much in advertising, it's so much used in art and creativity and, you know, and history. The power of symbols and magic is very important because it holds so much people's intention, which can go either way, light or dark, helping us or hurting us. It's also part of the work we do with the cosmic shamanic work is taking back our power from the misuse of symbols, so that things that are being used against us, we need to recycle it, transmute it, reclaim it, heal the part of ourselves maybe that contributed or we felt victimized by that symbol, you know, so that we're not just giving our power or giving too much fear towards it. You know, you have that, especially when it comes to like the pentagram, like the inverted pentagram versus the upright pentagram. There's a lot of things that go on with that has to do with a distortion of the 5 elements, you know, and so it's part of it. I work with in the Kabbalah is about healing, and there's one example, the double pentagram, the upright and inverted pentagram, need to be brought back together to create like a decagram, a 10-pointed star that represents the whole tree of life in a more harmonious state, so that we're not split between superiority complex of above fighting with the energy of matter and senses from below, but that they meet together in the heart chakra, you know, and that decagram also as a geometric symbol. A decagon has an angle of 144 degrees, which is a Fibonacci number and relates to a lot of stuff in like Revelations, like the New Kingdom being connected to 144. There's a lot of these coded references to sacred geometry and angles that you'll find in some of these higher systems or in numerology. And part of the Kabbalah work that I do also, that's going to be coming out in the book, there's a whole other system I was discovering about working with the Tree of Life and being able to calculate, you know, like the diameters of all the planets in our solar system using Hebrew terms that relate to the planets, and calculating the speed of light with terms also in that system, a different form of numerology that I'm working with. So there's a lot of encoded information in ancient systems that we can also begin to reaccess to build a platform of higher mind connections. And those points of higher mind and higher heart, you know, create more of a space so that our galactic brothers and sisters can then help beam energy more to our individual points in our body, because we're living towers of light. So one of the other archetypes that we kind of work with, which I talked about before, is called the star heart. It's the evolution of the heart chakra. where we're able to receive more love from higher planets, higher star systems. It can appear in different ways. It can appear like a wheel with crystals, like you're almost like a wheel of time or medicine wheel. It can appear like a star, like Aaron's breastplate, or like a tic-tac-toe pattern, like a basic magic square, like say a 3x3 or 4x4 square with crystals in it. And it can also appear as a simple octahedron or a diamond shape with different colors. And the idea is that that structure is helping us create new chambers in our heart chakra, in our Merkaba field, so that the vectors of love being transmitted from these higher civilizations has a place to be harbored, to penetrate, to inseminate us, to ground us, you know. So that, because part of it's like, we've been so conditioned not to receive love in an unconditional way by all our society influences, religion, sin and guilt, all these toxic. Oh, nice. nice. Exactly. So, you know, so half the work is about deconstructing all the dams we've created about blocking and choosing to receive love in our life, not just from each other, but also from the higher realms, and from, you know, it's kind of like expanding our gradations, like building a higher voltage capacity to be able to ground more amperage, right, of higher chi energy that is encoded with love. And so if you can't receive love, say, from the sun or moon, then it's hard to receive it from the stars. It's like building up your network oscillation potential, you know, so that you can really cascade that energy down, you know, and you're like, wait, I am so much more than I realize I am, but also that you are so much more loved than you realize you are. So it's like, how can I receive love from the Arcturians? Can I receive love from the Pleiadians? Can I receive love from the Vegans? Can I receive love from the Syrians? So it's like, the more you can isolate points in your field or in the sky, you know, even starting at the basic level, Kabbalistically, we work with astrologically, we work with the planets in our solar system, work with the astrological signs. You know, can I be open to receive love from Jupiter, from the higher beings that are on Jupiter? Jupiter is populated. There's some really powerful fifth dimensional beings who live on Jupiter, and like the real Zeus energy is there. Like, these are not just, there's reasons why our mythos and our archetypes, you know, from like the Greek mythology, you know, were carried down through the ages. It wasn't just some fancy little story. I mean, I had higher light encounters and telepathic encounters with the real Zeus on Jupiter. It's just two levels. So there's figureheads that embody the archetype, right? And then there's the actual energy of the archetype, and then there's planets that are homes for that archetype, that really act as pure kind of ray messengers to broadcast it out to other parts of the system, of the cosmos, as an anchor point. So like the same way we work with Gaia as Mother Earth consciousness, well, there's the energy of Zeus that is actually this Jupiter planet consciousness. There is a higher divine father energy that is part of the identity of the field of energy of Jupiter. And part of the fleets of some of the ships on Jupiter, they also work a lot with the Arcturians. They have a similar kind of cast or mold of this defender race and guardian energy and like expansion and like glory and great and like prosperity, similar to the Kabbalistic qualities, but they kind of refine it more in their culture. I'll go longer because, you know, I'm not going to be, there's nobody after me, so. So some of the, and then, no, there have been different periods of history where where they interacted more with us, so where there was dramas like, because of like Maldek, you know, which was in between Jupiter and Mars, where some of the so-called Anunnaki had come in and that planet had been blown up. There was different points in our early history that we have some early interference points where the negativities first came into our solar system and kind of set up a wave of domination and tension or chaos infiltration. So some of the work we do on a higher level too is about trying to go back in our timeline to be able to bring love back to these earlier points in time so that we can reframe, discharge, heal some of the fractures that the original conflicts have created that are still kind of echoing for a lot of us and for the planet in general. So it's like the same way we need to heal our own personal history to move forward, the same thing on a collective level. But if we forgot our history, it's kind of hard to heal it, right? So it starts with a basic idea. Let's remember some important things. Let's create a conduit to send that love energy back through time so that time becomes more of a springboard to propel us into the future instead of something we're always fighting against and trying to transcend and thinking that is illusionary when it is, but it has a power behind it that is about creation and the rhythm of unfoldment that we need to really accept if we want to be grounded in our bodies. We can't just be dissing time like in the New Age movement, especially there's a lot of twisted relationship with time that I hear people talking about where it's always this kind of like insult to time or like, oh no, I'm above time, we'll transcend time. Time is illusion. Well, fuck, right now it's working. Right now your clock is running. So you had something, again, a 6-dimensional level solution, but 3-dimensional, it's pretty active, you know, so let's not be too, you know, retarded about it. So, you know, and they, you know, it's because they want to go on their higher, you know, 5th, 12th dimensional, like they start here. You know, you're not even a 4th yet, you want to go 12th, give me a break. You know, there's there's a lot of this, crap going on in the New Age too about, wanting to get so up there. They want to keep accelerating the numbers of the chakras and dimensions when they can't even deal with the basic ones we have, So let's bring that back to order, then we can deal with the next octave, And so again, it's subtle ways that they want to appeal to our desire to escape as opposed to actually ground, and connect. They want to provide more of a little instantaneous solution as opposed to actually, discipline and regular practice that's required if you want to actually grow and, claim your own ascension path. It's a discipline. It's love and it's grounded and it's fun, but it requires regular action, just like your body needs regular food and regular drinking and hygiene. You want to bitch about drinking water every day. That's kind of be stupid, So it's the same idea, What is a reservoir that is feeding your thoughts and emotions? Well, you can hook in that. You can shift your ventilation system, your plumbing system, so you can tap into the elements that are coming in from the higher positive galactic worlds, and understand that they have elements there too, obviously, right? They have their own version of air or water, fire, ether, spirit. So there's new energies coming in now that are allowing us to create more of a kind of a series or a network of bouncing the signals, so that our elements here can get a new upgrade, a new higher harmonic reference point. So it's what we're calling in the air of Valthusia, or calling in the atmosphere of Saturn, or Jupiter, to help us inspire our local mind to evolve to a higher mind. So these are things about rerouting our concept. We'll make it go longer, guys. What is the other group? Some of the larger fleets that the Arcturians kind of dispatch is more present on Valdori or Valdor. Valthusia has a lot more of the training system. So if you blend some of the energy of Merlin, some of the energy of the Celtic priestesses of Avalon with Freya, Odin, that's also on Valthusia. So it's a galactic mystery school, wizard training planet as well. So it's very, very beautiful, energy there. So it's not just divine justice, it's also a mastery of higher skill sets, of how to create and manifest with these really beautiful magical realms. They have close affiliation, obviously, with many other worlds. And so sometimes when you connect with one planet, it can help you connect to another planet through their lineage. It's following a little magical map and seeing where are the branches of their tree of life. And in the Nordic system, they have their own tree of life, right? They call it the Yggdrasil, right, which has 9 worlds. And even in the last Thor movie, when they had the battle going on about the gateways, that's literally stuff that's been going on. Or Loki, who is a real being, he's not just a little character of mythology. He's not just a little trickster. He's a pretty big asshole at a higher level. He's a negative, higher, more like a fifth dimensional dark being, who is a leader of some very powerful negative Nordic ETs. Think of more Hitler, Thule Society type crap, or the Black Sun type of thing. He likes to sabotage, or his group likes to sabotage some of the stuff that the positive Arcturian Thor Odin group is trying to do in their outreach programs to other planets. So I've worked with a bunch of starseeds too, and we do some different group work, and try to identify some of these things, because I've had a lot of people I know have gotten hit psychic attacks by some of these groups connected with Loki, and more recently, this past several months, I've seen that they have in the Kabbalistic system, there's a negative tree, there's a tree of death that a lot of the dark magicians, and I want to call them satanic because they're more than that. They work with very specific dark entities that are not just demonic, but also some of them work more with negative extraterrestrials. But it's been too much in our media where we lump it together and just call it satanic when that's just one entity as opposed to the real, the real bad guys that are there. And the thing is that there are these groups, that really work very mischiefully, very dark, to try to create more of a negative thought form structure, that vamp people's energies and fuel their own negative agendas. So, this is very real stuff. It's not, and there these kind of magical battles occur all the time, and I've met many people over the years, involved in light groups and dark groups, and it's important that we understand that this is something that we have to really ground our healthy boundaries to be able to transmute some of the negative psychic dialogue or negative thought forms or egregores, different shadow entities that these groups try to create to harass people. And some of the military groups, I knew several years ago, was a remote viewer, and his dad was high up in the NSA, and he confirmed stuff I knew about how they were hiring some of the Santeria covens up in Washington Heights to harass people with black magic projections as a larger kind of package of harassment that would also include remote influencers and negative psychotronic projections and stuff. So the methodology of some of these people in power is really friggin' psychopathic, very sick. But they don't leave any stone unturned in terms of wanting to try to harass us or keep people down that are breaking out of the system. So there's support, there's a lot of light coming in, but if we're not aware of the toxins around us, then we can't develop countermeasures. So it's really realizing the importance of understanding what are these toxic, noxious influences, and creating a healthy filtration system to transmute it and block it out. So that's why I'm discussing, some of these other areas. So with the Loki group, also, a lot of these groups also work with manipulating some of the energy forces, like, for example, I'm putting into that. Some of the particles that we have in nature, like in subatomic physics, that are normally have a short lifespan, like the muons, which are supersized electrons. Basically, they're 207 times size electron, but they're one of the most abundant particles, aside from the neutrinos, that comes from the sun, or the muon streams. And you barely hear about these things, but unless you're into physics, right? But now, even like the TSA was trying to build these detectors they wanted to put in the airport that was based upon muon detectors, because that's how much muons come through our body. They were developing technology. They actually were using it in the Great Pyramid to find one of the chambers, was through the muon devices, because the stream of muons, as it interfaces with heavier metals or other material, it'll be dispersed differently, just like an X-ray would be able to penetrate through matter and bounce off certain parts of material. They have detectors that can pick up and use these other types of particle streams. They're not just coming to us randomly. There is influence here. There's technology they developed to sort of harness these other particles that evolve as not just carriers of other forces of nature, but also on a higher dimension. Some of these particles are, really are like a higher form of structured light energy, that is a gift from infinity, that is a gift from higher realms that encodes information to us. Just like breathing in chi energy or doing sun meditations and honoring that stream of light, having, as opposed to just the chaotic version of it, really creating a space to invite it in. So some of these groups, they work on using all the different types of forces to transmit information, the same way we work with microwaves or different frequencies electromagnetically to transfer with our cell phones. They've also found ways to manipulate gravity waves, gravitational forces, and the strong force, which holds our nucleuses together, to try to create different types of projections, which are not usually always good. But the positive groups on a higher galactic level do it in a good way, but it's understanding that sometimes we get moved by influences that are messing with some really primal forces. So when we do our invocations of intention, the four directions also kind of represent the basic four forces of nature. And you want to be able to include that idea of asking the higher light beings to send light into your quantum makeup, so that your quantum crystalline field, which really represents your underworld in that sense, is able to hold and have an integrity that mirrors the galactic light that is coming in from upper world. Because how do we actually even know basically about upper world on a physical level is through these tiny particles, right, that come from stars, that come from planets, that travel, millions of light years or billions of light years. So it's like the tiniest underworld messengers give us the picture of upper world, at least on a physical level. So that same idea is how as above and so below are so entangled together to help us weave our perception of what reality is about. So we are in that middle zone as a bridge, right, between the two. So the idea is that when we become more conscientious and invite that energy into our tiniest little quantum, they call quantum infinity, quantum infinity, star heart, actually is one of the terms they call it, quantum infinity star heart field. It's almost like a fractal crystal, where you're able to understand all these little subsets of that fractal are now becoming even more important for us to identify with, to create with, to love, to acknowledge. And because those tiniest little kingdoms also kind of reflect the energy of the fairies and the elves, the elemental kingdoms that have, that in their pure energy form reflect that level of creation, on the tinier scales. So once we're humble and identifying gratitude to the tinier realms, then the higher realms open up to us more easily, because we're not just there stomping on their terrain and being egotistical, like, oh no, who cares about the fairies and elementals? It's a test. Like Alice in Wonderland, or when she has to go through the tiny doorway. Your ability to minimize is directly proportional to your ability to maximize. So the more we kind of let that love energy into the tiniest parts of our being, the more it provides a key to access a larger field of energy that's coming in from the cosmic and the galactic. And then it's like synchronizing lenses of a telescope, so that they can have a clear resolution, like taking a picture and having the frame having a clearer focus, so the energy of the image is able to come through from that far point all the way to your third eye, your physical eye. Some of the groups also, I'll go a little bit to different areas. There's also a lot of material I talked about in the last expo. That's on YouTube, the March expo. You can watch that video too. That I talk about some other interesting, more of the negativity groups I talk about there as well, and some other interesting material that involves more of the hypercube grid system. one of the groups that we're dealing with now has also been, we've been doing a long time with, that's been kind of annoying for a lot of us, but there's been much bigger, very, very recent transmutation of their grids, has been a negative like octopus group, like a negative octopi humanoid group, kind of like the Cthulhu idea of like the mythos storyline, or some call like one of the Archon groups, but I don't even like to use that term. They're a bunch of idiots to me, but so I don't give them more power than they deserve, you know. But they really can be a pain in the ass. I mean, I've had a lot of psychic attacks with them. I've worked with a lot of people. I mean, you know, literally almost knocked on the floor from like the pain of their tentacles trying to come into my body, and also some clients' fields. So this group has been around since Atlantis. They first made their inroads in Atlantis. They had like a global dark, I mean, literally looked like a global dark octopi grid surrounding the atmosphere of the Earth, like a network of these octopi etheric spirits connecting the tentacles, like really disgusting looking, you know. And I was like, oh, that's really nasty. That got busted up a few years ago, but they were coming back in through a new alliance they were making with the negative AI group. And part of the negative AI group was being also controlled by, this is very high level stuff that I didn't access because it took a long time to get to this point, because they like to keep some of their intel very more covert, you know. There was a higher being that comes from out of the galaxy. They kind of look like they like to work with like the Baphomet archetype, but more multidimensional. They kind of have the horns, almost like the traditional satanic looking thing, but they could be more like almost like super soldier, you know, light humanoids with the dark horns, you know, pretty creepy, you know. But they're one of the groups that come from outside the galaxy, and they're working with they're one of the directors of the negative AI group, so I just mentioned that to be aware in case, you know, because they also like to use, again, it's a point-to-point correspondences. How do they arc energy into our local collective to be able to influence it or help it? Right, it works both ways. Shining light through a mirror, is it illusion or is it truth that you're shining through the mirror to help the person see a bigger reflection of themselves, or are you trying to reinforce a lower side of themselves, right? So cleaning the mirrors is important, upgrading our mirrors. So like part of that work also, you know, is being able to upgrade a relationship not just to the moon, because the moon has a lot of stuff going on it, both on light and dark side. So when we do like more moon meditations and higher work, we're also zooming into specific quadrants of the moon where the higher positive light beings and galactic beings are building sacred circles, have sacred facilities, or are casting their mold to be able to help us find our point. The same way that we have a point that connects us to the Earth Mother, and Gaia wants to love each of us, and then we have this beautiful area we can ground into. There are points in the moon. It's like finding what is your unique pathway that is your specific group that is on the moon, that is using the moon to help you expand your reflection of who you are. So it's like really like building up this stepping stone of correspondences, so that you're giving permission to all these little things to come in alignment, because it may sound intricate, but we need all this stuff to help us cut through the crap. So the octopus group, yes, they were coming in more recently again, and I worked on somebody recently. It was intense. Like he actually threw up during the session. I almost threw up like 20. Like, I was gagging like 20 times. It was one of those horrific. Like it was coming through our body, but we were accessing an ancient memory that this person I was working on, who was involved in some of the earlier high-level like solar system councils that were working like original Olympus energy before it came to the Earth, and working with the Solar Logos. We were tracking back the original infiltration of this negative octopi group into the solar system, and it was almost like a dark octopi on like the throne of the Solar Logos field, as almost like a parasite into our solar system. So it was like tracing back that line to be able to heal and pull it out, almost like a timeline exorcism, to go so that we can clear it out and replace it with a more positive reference point, so that the light beings can help us rewrite our past so we can be more empowered in our future. It's because they work non-cyclically. They're working at a higher level that is above linear time. So the more we understand that we're not caught in a loop, but we can work with points in time from a higher realm to help us now, it creates a whole different space of liberation potential, and also fun, you know, we start to invite other things. So, and we had to do a lot of work with Atlantis. A lot of work has been going on with Atlantis. A lot of different groups have been working on, if you're kind of zooming into Atlantis on a pure realm of time, there are many gateways going into Atlantis from many different time periods, and many groups were trying to infiltrate, mess with, distort, because so many timelines got initiated from Atlantis that went awry. And so there's a very important area of really healing that techno society so that it is not being used against us. You know, and also it gives a chance for the actual Atlantean vortexes that are in the Atlantic Ocean, from the temples of Poseidon and different ones that are out there. They want to help us, all especially along the East Coast, because we have a direct connection to the ley lines there. So we kind of ask some of these higher Atlantean allies in the spirit realm to give them permission to let some of these ley lines reconnect to New York, reconnect to the city. It helps create a more positive space so that we get jacked up in a good way, you know, with more of our allies. Because there's also bigger stories of parallel Earths that tie into this. There's a positive parallel Earth where Atlantis was won by the light, and we refer to it as Nova Terra. And some of the beings from over there really want to help us out here because they already ascended. They're on a higher level. They're in the beginning of that phase, but they've always been much more utopian in the mindset. So it's definitely something we need to kind of ground more as a positive, energy of how we work together, with positive technology, positive social, alliances and respect, and in positive dialogue with the loving extraterrestrials. They have full contact over there. So it's like, well, if a parallel positive has it, we certainly can replicate it here. So it's the idea of really grounding that reference point, because the flip side of it that I talk about in some of the other videos is there's a negative realm that's called Trinicon. One of the names that goes by, it's a negative parallel Earth, where Atlantis didn't sink but was won by the dark. And that's been a real pain in the ass for a lot of people for many years, because part of the shadow government has projects to go over there physically, kind of like what the idea with the Fringe TV show was trying to get into was really about that. And with the Montauk Project, where Preston Nichols was also involved in that. And also people know Preston Nichols died actually a few weeks ago. It was very sad. Yeah, a few of us were planning to go over to visit him again, but he had some strokes. But when I first met Preston Nichols years ago from the Montauk Project, and first I met him, I already had visits from him on a higher level, as out-of-body presence-wise. I knew he was living in that parallel negative reality, because I had an incarnation. There were a certain number of light workers that had parallel incarnations in Trinicon. And so I worked with a lot of people from over there. And when he first met me, he said that he knew me, but I was 12 years old when he first met me. I was 12 in 1983, which was height of the Montauk Project, so that was a bit creepy as a reference point. About the
commemoration of Preston Nichols.
Oh my God! Oh wow! Preston Nichols is nice. Okay, wow, at the Expo, that's wild. Good, perfect timing for that one. I'm about in a few minutes. So that's point there's a lot of stuff going on where it's like healing the split within ourselves and also within our timeline and within our reality structures, so that we're able to choose more positive reference points to kind of compile and really invoke this clear timeline corridor. And any questions? Because I don't have to end soon here, but I can go on. It's a lot of material here. Anybody want a pressing question about something?
So what's the practical things that we can do on a daily basis? Like you mentioned, hygiene, etc., but how to keep ourselves clear and orient ourselves to receive maximally the good intentions from these good beings and forces and all that.
Yeah, first question was about what can we do practically at a grounded level to help us maintain our higher hygiene and connect to these higher beings. Well, I mean, one thing I want to offer people also is to definitely sign up on my mailing list, because I also record all the group meditations I do. In the warm weather, I've been doing them at the Obelisk. We just finished the last one there a few days ago for the full moon in Taurus. The Cleopatra Lido in Central Park is a powerful vortex. So I mean, that's why I always do all the work out there from the spring to the fall. And there's another point in Riverside Park. There's a large mound on 84th Street. Finding basic points in the city where you can ground and meditate while it's warm is very important to be able to connect to the higher Gaia energy that's coming up, because she's constantly wanting to give us new energy, and there's a lot of waves of her Kundalini that are coming up to help us in our own ascension process and healing. So going to a place we can actually feel the earth is kind of important and helpful, and be able to reference that back to your own home. I record all of them audio-wise. I make them available on Dropbox, usually donation basis, but people sign up. I'll give you the last one for free on Dropbox. So those ones I can send out to you, because each month we do, even in the cold season, I'll do it indoors. But there's new codings and information that comes in twice a month for us when we do the group work. That's way beyond what I could even talk about right now, because some of the things built upon other activations before. It's an extension of the idea of the dialogue of creating like the new thought forms. So that we can create more of an exchange between ourselves and the higher beings, and so that they can empower us through that new dialogue space, which is energetic and linguistic,
You want name and email?
Yeah, your name and email, yeah. And if you want to put your phone number too, just in case I can't read your email, because it happened last time where I couldn't read several people's email writing. So I couldn't email them. I'm also on Facebook too. You can find me on Facebook under my name. And the main work I do is individual sessions. That's also what work I do with people individually, both in person who live in New York and the phone for people that are further away, are these guided channel journeys combined with energy work where I can tap into the person's own Akashic field and their lineage to help channel for you techniques that are relevant for you, pertinent for you, to help you get on with what you need to ground for your next step. So that can be a progression of integrating past lives and clearing out some karmic blockages or negative things that were done to you, to helping you reconnect to your cosmic lineages. So it's in stages. Some people are ready to pop, and they're like, they shoot up really fast during a session, but people take more time, just depending upon how you are in your own rigidity or developmental process, and belief systems. But and I also always recommend people to do work with the sun. Sun meditations, because energy coming from the sun is very important. So a basic one I do is like a chakra breathing, where I tell people, I call it the 777 meditation, where you basically just take a conscious breath from the sun into each chakra, one at a time. You can do like the seed mantras, the Om and the Ham, Yam, the different mantras for the chakras. And the idea is you want to visualize like a waterfall of light coming from the sun down your body, and when it goes into the earth, it goes back up to the sun. So it's creating this, it's tracing out the idea of this solar circuit that is happening, right, electromagnetically, magnetically, gravitationally, and higher forces of nature between the sun and the earth, and that we forgot how to get ourselves back in tune with this because of our own conditioning, and forgetfulness. So part of the work, like in Egypt, in the Mayan culture, we all knew about the solar mysteries, and the sun work was how I first got activated. I remember how to look into the sun for long periods of time when I was about 21, and that blew me open to a lot of the higher light beings that live on the sun, other stars that are 6-dimensional, 7-dimensional, and above. That also opened up me to drama from the shadow government, and I started having the black helicopters fly by, and it started the whole drama. Because I talk about in some of the videos online, and realizing, oh yeah, they have technology where they try to monitor people who are opening up some of these portals, and some of the higher dimensional extraterrestrial beings kind of can leave a signature if you're not. So it's always important to invoke protection and privacy with the energy, so that you're not just being read by other forces that you don't want to be given attention to. It's also why some of the ships don't come down as low here in New York, because they get so many dark secret space program systems in place that try to chase them away. I mean, we literally had some high-flying UFOs when I first came back from England. I did work over there 2 years ago, and there was major grid points that were activating there, and like we had a bunch of UFOs flying over. We had 2 crop circles form that was connected to the work we were doing, like literally the next day and 3 days later. And then we started having black helicopters flying around, the people that were hosting me in England, and it was a whole lot of drama when I got back here at the Obelisk, the first meditation, and massive channeling was coming in from the Arcturian groups, and then people was like, look, open your eyes, and there was we could see Arcturus in the sky. We had some high-flying UFOs that flew over that area, but before they came, I had a dream the night before of a black helicopter that was projecting my dream plane. They were trying to invert part of the symbolism of what I was working with in the grid system in England. And so literally it came up physically, a black helicopter came during the beginning of meditation and just started sending a nasty like beam pulse to our group. Like it was like an implosive electric, like almost like kind of like a torsion field weapon where they try to implode the energy around you. But we're like, F you, we're gonna block it out. And then that happens first time, then 15 minutes later, we start seeing the UFOs, then a second black helicopter comes and it's underneath the area where the UFOs are, as if it's trying to chase or create a counter signal to try to push away some of the positive ships from coming too close. So it was a kind of a dramatic thing to see, wow, we have a little show going on every day, shadow government or positive Arcturian ships, like, what the hell, the Obelisk. So, and so that's one reason why it's also risky, in a sense, for them to come too close to a place like this. When we were doing ritual work in Montauk several years ago, I had 12 of us, and we had 7 ships that flew down. I mean, if they were any lower, they would have like landed. It was that low, and they were connecting with the work we were doing out of Montauk. They looked like orange orbs, but the first one that flew over, when we were doing the grid work there at the large crystal at the veteran cemetery that the Montauk Indians were doing a ritual at. This after we left the old base at Camp Hero, we were doing grid work out there. And when we were at Camp Hero at nighttime, there were these crazy flashes in the sky. It looked literally like stargates opening high up in the sky. It's like ring flashes of light, boom, 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 opening. We're like, oh shit, who's coming through there? There's always been weird shit whenever we do stuff out of Montauk, And so then we get to the other spot, and then after that, lights coming up. We heard this like nasty, like growling. It sounded like a werewolf coming out of the woods, and we actually said we need not go that direction. It was the creepiest sound I've heard of any type of animal. Probably wasn't an animal, probably was some psyops thing going on or something. But we decided to leave that area. We went to the other area where the large rock was at, big calcite crystal. So when we're driving there, 3 carloads, and we see one of this big orange orb UFO fly over us. We're like, oh shit, that's pretty freaking low there. So we get to the spot with the crystal, and as soon as we get there, and then it's right by the water there in Montauk, the ship comes back again, and it's flying really, really slow. And it's only like, I would say about 10 stories high above us, like it's really low. And it's flying low, I'm like, oh, hi, what's going on, guys? So I asked them telepathically, I'm like, show me your true form. Are you a higher dimensional orb, or is it just a plasma field around the actual ship? When I sent the intention out, they turned off the force field, and I could see like a silver saucer-shaped craft that was a little bit different than normal saucer, but it was that basic design. Then they turned back the field on, and an orange glow appeared around the ship. So that's an example. These things are like real. They can come down if you're really doing work with them. And then when the rest of the group got there, at the end of the activation, 7 ships came, one behind the other, right over us, and then they all teleported out, like turning lights off in the sky, boom, 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 boom. So that was the most incredible, like, close UFO thing I've ever had with a group, and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing, you know. So these things happen, and things that they want us to connect to them more because they want to engage us to help us give them free will permission to transform ourselves and our society and create a space where they feel more invited to land and engage us with creating actual structures, embassies, places in which we can exchange technology and society with them, because the Earth has already chosen that. The Earth has already chosen to elevate herself to be part of this larger confederation of planets. It's just that the negative groups and the negative matrices around the Earth are creating a push-pull dynamic to try to slow that process down on that spiritual and physical level. So we need to cut some of that dark web energy that has been put around the Earth, literally, as a dark web. And that part of that dark web connects to a lot of negative ET groups that put it in place. It's like the real matrix energy. And there are these negative spider groups also that we were working a lot with, encountering. That were working with Set. He was one of the other negative ET groups leaders from like the Egyptian mythology. He was the one who killed Osiris, but on a real level, he's like the Emperor from Star Wars. But he's like a six-dimensional, one of the highest level that you can get on the dark side, and he's one of the main idiots that, you know, has been involving a lot of the Dark Empire of Orion. He comes from the dark side of Orion. And there are Temple of Set, you know, practitioners, different covens that are called the Temple of Set. I mean, they have websites, some of the public ones, and some of the shit they put on their website, I was amazed by. I wish I would have looked at it earlier, because some of the sub-orders in that Temple of Set will literally talk about some of the same negative beings that we were fighting over the past few years. You know, they have like an order of Leviathan, which is one of the other names they refer to as the octopus beast god, and they have another group there called the Knights of the Black Flame. Which is an idea of this dark, more like the dark flame, if you will, of the black sun. And it's literally on their website. And it's like, so there's like the public version of Temple of Set, and there's then like the ones that Illuminati work with and crossover membership in the military and industrial complex. And more recently, they've been teaming up with other darker coven groups that involving the Octopus group, as well as a negative group from Sirius B, which I also talked about a little bit more last time. This negative group from Sirius B is one of the other bloodlines of some of the Illuminati families. It's not just the reptilian Draco, that's a little bit of propaganda. It's there, but there's other groups that have contributed their DNA to our negative power structure. And they usually try to keep out of the limelight and just blame everything on the reptilians so they don't get enough attention. You know? So it's important that we also, you know, kind of call out some of these costumes and illuminate some of the other characters. Just so we understand, you know, that we're dealing with a really ancient system of many different types of negative grids of the matrix that have tried to keep us suppressed. At the same time, the positive groups want to give us the opposite and help use our heart as a projector of light to really connect to a positive galactic star heart, you know, grid of consciousness, you know, that is entangled to all this love energy that all these worlds that have evolved. And the heart chakra, I have kind of like a hyperspatial, you know, quantum entanglement that connects these worlds. And so when we're in that higher vibration, we can connect with that and ground it here and use that to kind of override the negative portal systems that the negative ETs are using to access the Earth, mainly through negative sites, you know, where dark ritual have been done, or in the Middle East where a lot of people have been killed or sacrificed in the name of war, you know, have fed these ancient vortexes. And also through different technology, you know, type of activations in the Earth. There's been a lot more clearing literally going on the past few months of Mother Earth and inner Earth civilizations sealing up some of these negative portals inside the Earth. So that's a very good thing. We need more of that to continue. So there's a lot of progress happening, but it's hard to see when we have this blinder of this negative, you know, chaos going on in different areas of our society. It's very easy to get lost in that soap opera and not understand there's so much better infrastructure happening that is actually very beautiful. We just need to keep the sails in that direction. But I think I probably should stop soon. Anybody, any question?
Yeah, how does the hypercube grid fit in with that latest grid radius?
Yeah, we first activated part of what we call hypercube grid, when was that, 4 years ago in Costa Rica. There's basically 16 points of a 4D cube, like a normal cube has 8 points, right? So a fourth dimensional cube or a tesseract or hypercube would have 16 vertex points. And the same way that in the past there are different geometries where like you put the Earth inside, say, a dodecahedron or, you know, a tetrahedron, there are different points in the Earth you can map that can be significant, like either like megalithic sites or like volcanoes or like high content of crystals, you know, the sacred sites different civilizations used. As we're evolving into this higher heart chakra energy, there is a higher fourth dimensional cube field forming around the Earth where there are 16 points, which the cube has, that 4D cube has, and so there are 16 locations on the Earth where these pillars of light are being anchored as part of that infrastructure of that new evolutionary scaffolding. And hypercube is a very interesting structure, many levels. It kind of, when I was doing a lot of work with it, it's kind of like, think of like a prism. The way a prism is for white light, it makes a rainbow out of it. A hypercube does that for time. Hypercube is like a prism for timelines, for waves of time. So it's like a nexus point where many threads of different timelines are woven into a common structure that you can interface multiple timelines through it, where each square of that cube becomes a doorway to a different timeline. So it's a very powerful structure. And then, in the Law of One books, they mentioned briefly that the pyramid, one of the pyramids of Atlantis, was still active in the Atlantic Ocean, that was really making the Bermuda Triangle, was due to a spiral of energy that was coming out of the pyramid. And at a specific turn of the spiral of energy that the pyramid was emitting, there was a hypercube that was created, and it moved within a certain radius of that turn of the spiral, and that it provided the doorway. So if ships or planes went through it, it would transfer it to other timelines, basically, or locations. And so the same idea, there's also, I can't remember his name, there's an Egyptian physicist. When I researched after I started channeling more work with the hypercube, he was writing up a whole theory based upon hypercubes being the basic kind of pixelation of quantum reality on an ultimate substrate, was like almost like tiling for our quantum reality was made of these hypercubes, which I was like, oh, that's cool, that's a lot closer to what I've seen, working with them. And so when we did first did work in Costa Rica, there's a volcano there in Arenal, off of La Fortuna, and that's where we're doing work there to clear out, because there were a lot of negative ET groups that were trying to take advantage of this new grid as it's beginning to activate. So these are like hot zones, like think of like Suez Canal. These hypercube points are like a hot zone for light and dark forces to try to use it to access our new grid system. And it's still being activated. It's not fully turned on yet. It's happening over time. And ironically enough, it was a Loki group that was involved in trying to mess with the one in Costa Rica. And one of my friends down there, when she was helping me organize the event, she was getting massive psychic attacks like this for a week before I got there, and massive headaches, and we were tracking what almost looked like a gargoyle-like beast, demon energy, but it was actually being sent by Loki's group to act as a deterrent from activating that vortex there. But we activating it, it was the most amazing energy going on, and then throughout that trip there, we ended up having a visit from some of the local indigenous tribes that were coming to the eco lodge I was staying with, and there was a whole little gathering going on. And anyway, but it was a longer story. But then we went to England to activate one in England, and there's a point in England in a place they call Stipperstones, which is on the border between Wales and England and Shropshire, the county there. And Stipperstones is only natural outgrowth of quartzite rock in all of England. So it looks like a playground for the giants. These amazing stones and crystals coming out of the ground. They're like, oh my God, what happened? I've seen this in movies, And it's like nobody there. It's in the middle of nowhere. They have like a little center built there. So before I knew about the spot, I was doing some remote work with a friend and a client in England, and they were showing me like X on the map, remote viewing wise. I could see it on the map, but I didn't know it was there. So it's like, what is that? This spot I keep seeing on the map, and it was at Stipperstones location. So that was the point we had to go activate with some groups about 3 years ago. Yeah, I think it was 3 years ago. Back a year later as well. And then when we were there, we had to activate other points around England first. There was a larger kind of phoenix grid that was forming. There's a part of this energy, again, is that these higher archetypes and that are being used not just by us in ancient cultures, but also higher dimensional positive extraterrestrials and negative work with different symbols. Like think of like apps on your phone or apps on your computer. They'll work with different symbols that help interface into their collective consciousness space. They're information fields that work with different structures, whether it's an animal structure, a sigil, a symbol. It can take on different forms. And so anything can be used for light or dark. So the tesseract is one thing too. It can be used. I've seen negative versions of the hypercube that some of the group from SET was using. When I came back from one trip, even before that, there was this horrible grid that they were trying to project on my apartment, and there was like a dark spider web made of smaller shadow cubes that were lined up in 8 directions. And I was like, oh my God, like this dark web made of shadow cubes, like pain in the ass is this, to get rid of. So, the understanding is that we're dealing with like 4 fourth-dimensional entities. They're going to work with the basic building blocks that comprises the geometry of that fundamental realm, right? To use it either for light or dark, depending upon whose consciousness is intending into it. So it's it's not just like, oh, let's go spin this Merkaba and all magic happens. It's like you got to qualify your Merkaba, and the spinning of your energies. So we would do a meditation where we visualize the hypercube in each chakra of our body and have the center of the chakra be the middle of the hypercube. And one simple way hypercube to visualize is like a cube within a cube, where the points connect through lines. The inside cube connects through lines to the outside vertex points. There's other visualizations online if you Google where they show like moving, geometries of the hypercube moving around. And then the grounding of the hypercubes in the body, we were doing that exercise in the group up in Harrogate and up in Yorkshire. Well, while that was happening, huge Phoenix energies were coming in as part of the guardian of this new grid system. And I've been working with the Phoenix energy from since 97 with the group. First activation we ever did was in these Indian mountains in Illinois, the Cahokia Indian mountains. And so this higher dimensional solar Phoenix grid is forming more on the 6th dimensional level. So there's multiple layers going on to help the Earth out. And so this Phoenix energy was coming in, and then the very next day after that first group activation in Harrogate, so before I went to England, the guide said, pay attention to some crop circles they're going to be connected to the activations we're having you do over there. So literally the next day, a crop circle forms of a cube with a sphere in the middle, just like the Earth being the center of the hypercube. I'm like, oh wow, that was immediate effect. 3 days later, a Phoenix crop circle forms with a cube as a head, with a sun disk, and we started dying laughing like, wow, you guys have a sense of humor here. And it was in a Native American motif of a sunbird, which references back to the first point that I ever activated with the group. And I was like, oh my God. So in that farmer let people go in there and do activations. So we were super excited. It was by Avebury. And we were going to go there the next day. So it was like perfect timing when it formed. And so when you get there, hundreds of birds were circulating, flying over the entrance of the Phoenix crop circle. I said, oh, I can't make this shit up. The magic bird tribe is summoning all the local birds. They literally were flying in a vortex pattern over the entrance for hours. And the people there said they just got there a few minutes before we got there, which is even funnier. So, and you could feel the energy. It was very different at different points in the crop circle. Some felt very light, some felt heavy, because it was also representing part of the energy we need to transmute, that local part of the Earth was kind of getting messed with by some of the British government facilities, were also beaming a lot of shit to the Earth there. So we're doing work on helping to start that process. There's one other point we're actively called, was it Brimmen Rocks? It's near, it's not too far from Harrogate, but the NSA and the CIA and MI6, they have one of their big facilities there. So literally you can see the big golf ball structures of the base, a few 5-minute drive from where we are in the distance, where another vortex is there naturally, because they love to build these bases right by vortexes. So we're doing an activation there, and it's like a smaller version of like the Stipper stones with these rocks on the ground. And we had this creepy guy come sort of 3/4 of the activation. This young guy, like a late teenager, but a total of vampire energy, and he just stands at the edge of our circle looking at us like this really dark vibe, looking at us. I'm like, what are you doing? And you can feel him trying to attack us and drain energy. And so I was like, oh, I gotta approach this guy. So we stopped and approached him, and he said he was part of a group of his parents work at the base there, and that he's part of and I called him. I was like, oh, you're part of a vampire group, aren't you? He goes, well, it's nothing too serious, but yeah. And I'm like, yeah. He goes, yeah. In fact, it's part of a group that we have on the base, from the children of our the parents in the base have their own little dark coven, which is typical. A lot of these bases that happens. So it was just nice to immediately meet somebody greeting us at that point, And I was like, well, maybe not. I saw a light in him, so I'm like, look, you're not just a little dark vampire. You're a higher starseed. Can you get over your shit and maybe take responsibility and maybe you want to choose a light here because you have a lot of dark stuff. So we talked for a little while, and then he got agitated going after he just ran away really quickly. So it's funny to see the little things that show up. And then one of my workshops there, a woman came to the workshop, and she just moved there to the base from America. Her husband was a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and they were now stationed at the base, and so she shows up at my meditation. And as soon as he walks in, I was like, oh my God, I could feel like she was like a MyLab and definitely had programmed personalities. And I was like, oh Jesus, she's gonna be intense to be with, so she was just telling me, that basically that Men with Hill is the name of the facility, Men with Hill, they have up to 50,000 people that live that are stationed underground. There's a huge underground facility there, and a lot of them live in surrounding areas, but that's how big it is. And it's like the main CIA, NSA, base with MI6 and stuff, and it connects to the secret space program. And her husband was involved in that part of the space program, and there was a lot to do with some of the secret satellites and other things going on there. So, and I met several people also in the local area that came, joined, and they knew people that worked in the base and who saw some of the great aliens that used to be there, and talked about some of the different satanic stuff that was going on with some of the workers there in the covens. So I end up finding a lot of stuff out when I go places, the guys always put me in the right direction. But it also grounds the idea of understanding these things are all interrelated. The inner planes and the outer planes all connect. Consciousness is influencing us on all different scales, right, on both sides. So it's important that we take back our power there and really ground that love. And because these are points also, when I came back, I had some remote harassment going on from some CIA energies that were coming in. They were connected to the helicopters, and they were telling me at a higher level that they were really trying to hack that for that hypercube grid. And more recently, another friend of ours that was tuning into it psychically felt they were also using some of the weather engineering by tapping into some of the hypercube points, that they were actually creating some more earthquakes and other opening points that they weren't necessarily expecting, but they're trying to mess with this grid and try to interfere with it artificially, so we need to send more light to really reinforce this. And literally had one new person I worked with literally yesterday from China, and there's a lot of new energy. Oh, this last part I'll talk about. A lot of new energy coming in with Kuan Yin and some of the higher positive vortexes. For example, like in Asia with Kuan Yin's temple, which is connected to Shambhala, some of the inner earth civilizations there, they're sending a lot of energy out to help us in many different levels. And so, because we're talking about any crystal, you can connect the points. It's like the planes of the crystal. So there are energies coming in from different beings that live at the different locations that want to work together to represent that harmonizing of joining their alliances so that they're not just divided as cultures or as ideas, but they can work together and help us create a new synergy and they're uniting that can help us override some of these negative energies. So there's been a new alliance really just started between energies of Shambhala, Kuan Yin, and the energies of the point in England because there's a hypercube point in China, so it's like those points are starting to connect. And so you can go from one to the other. So this alliance between some of the energies of Avalon and positive guardians in the British Isles are coming together to work with the energies of Shambhala and Kuan Yin. So that's a very interesting East meets West alliance. It's like uniting positive dragon orders and positive phoenix energies from both groups to help us clean out some of the negative other crap. So yeah, it becomes like interesting permutations that you can start seeing when you work in those levels, and they can give us like new updates in our body and our applications. Anyway, yeah, definitely should be done. What time is it now? Whatever. That was nice. Okay. All right, any last question? So I'm on the Ufo panel tomorrow at noon, so we'll have extra fun there with JJ Hertax on there, which always be a fun thing.
I got a request, and maybe you could do it again tomorrow if you feel like it. Ron Armerton recently passed on.
Yes.
And I was wondering, and also Sean David's where he is.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we just send them both some energy.
Yeah.
Maybe you could lead something.
Yeah, it's funny. I discussed with Ron too. I'm like, I was always upset with Ron about him always dissing time. It's a sad but true example. He always dissed timelines. He's always trying to get out of timelines. So he literally got himself out of time. But you can't live here in a body if you're out of time. It's like, so you really have to understand these concepts are powerful. You can't just take them lightly. You have to have a loving relationship with time. You can't diss it like he was doing all the time. So it's like, and he had lived in such a polarized reality where, like, I'll talk about clones at different times and understanding that, but he was going off the deep end with certain concepts, and it can reflect such a polarized reality that was really off-center. I'm like, that's really heavy energy you're holding on to, holding on to that perception. Because I've had my own encounter with clones and dealing with clone topics, but he thought that everybody was no longer human, everybody was replaced by a clone. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, what reality are you in? That's not, I'm like, yeah, they're using clone technologies to mess with certain people, but certainly we're all not cloned, and certainly it's not the level you're talking about. It's bigger than most people think, but not that scale. And that's the one example, but then, I'm like, oh no, you have to have fun with timelines. You dissociate from the negative ones, but reinforce the positive ones, because this is how we create. So definitely send the energy. Hopefully, he's not in limbo somewhere with that idea. Like it's okay. You can go up to your positive fleets. But that could be interesting, though. Yeah, and I have other friends that are more in contact with Sean too. I know he's having a rough time in there. But yeah. And anyway, yeah, good stuff. I'll talk to you. We'll see you tomorrow.